Oh, pirates, yes, they rob.
Welcome to Weed Wednesdays, produced by International Broadcast Media, better known as IBM.TV. I'm your host, Jeff Eichen, human rights advocate and social activist, fighting for government deregulation of weed and the release of all nonviolent criminals incarcerated for possession of marijuana, moving violations, parking tickets, IRS debt, etc. Here on WEEDsday, we keep the public informed about all things weed related, including festivals and legislation surrounding regulating the growth of hemp. Today, my guests are
There's something happening here. There's something happening here.
Yes, so I paroled in 2017 in October, and immediately at R&R, which is the booking and receiving end of prison, where they book you in and transfer you out. ICE was there to pick me up as soon as I was released, and they took me to my first detention facility, which was in Elk Grove, which is now closed because the contract had ended. And since then, I have been bounced around to two more detention facilities after that, which I landed in Yuba County Jail about August of last year. And that place is dangerous. It is a death sentence to detainees, especially right now with the coronavirus. Medical attention is very poor at best. The conditions there are filthy. The staff are very aware of the dangers and the dire situation that they have us all in. And they just don't care. They don't care about our safety. They don't care about our well-being. And it's clear in the way they treat us and in the hygiene kits and the food and the water that they provide us. It's a clear signal of their poor treatment and negligence towards us. And yeah, like you mentioned, I helped lead a hunger strike about 2 weeks ago. And thankfully, I was blessed and I was released last Tuesday, thanks to this COVID-19 bond, which they're calling it in there. But it's basically a death sentence. Anybody getting picked up from prison or getting picked up from the streets and going into a detention center it's basically a death sentence right now. They're playing Russian roulette with our lives. People are getting infected. Mesa Verde, Otay, San Diego. I mean, there's infections right now as we speak in Bakersfield, and these facilities know what's going on. Gavin Newsom knows it's going on, and yet he's doing nothing to prevent it, to stop it. countries, they know they have infected people, and they continue to deport them into these countries that have little to no resources to combat COVID-19. So, anybody can see that they're one of the main contributors to the spreading of coronavirus worldwide, and yet they're doing nothing to prevent it or stop it from continuing to spread.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Jeff Eichen, and we are going to look for my tools here on my tools here. Keep on top switch. I'm looking for my meeting tools here so I can assist you all in coming on. It's beautiful to have you. It's a shame that we're dealing with the pandemic that we are in prison. We have some beautiful guests today, and I'm going to let Stephanie, our guest host, Stephanie Landa, give us a little bit of your time, your POW time, and then introduce everybody. And then we'll start with Glenn, and Glenn will give us an update on sentencing. So take it away, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Landa, and I'm a ex-POW, and I did 5 years in federal prison, and now I have freedomgrowforever.org. We just launched our website. It's really exciting for me, and it's exciting for everybody. It's really colorful, and it's interactive, and you can actually go on there and sign petitions and get a pen pal or volunteer, and there's a lot of information about your North Prison. There's a lot of information about it. Pretty proud of it. Kristen Floor organized the whole thing. Great. It's great. So I hope everybody just goes to it. And there's a whole bunch more things to do besides donate. So I think we'll just start. Oh, you want to start with Glenn? Okay. I have introductions for everyone but Glenn.
Well, I'll introduce Glenn. Glenn is our poster hero of the week. We're so proud of you and your wife for just the horrible 2 years, not proud of you for 2 years of horridness, but and the hypocrisy of prohibition, but that you had to go through all this for 2 grams. Give us your story and your triumph. Give us your whole party, your welcome home party.
Right on. Well, thank you very much for having me on, Stephanie. Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. Well, my nightmare, our nightmare, started October 31st of 2017. Halloween night, we're passing out candy, and Halloween's over with. Everything's okay. We hear a knock at the door. I got 9 fully armed patrolmen standing at my door. It's a detective. I got 6 guys climbing over my back fence. I got 2 guys on the left side of my house. I got 3 guys on the right side of my house. They come in, they search my home, they confiscate essentially what is less than allowed for 2 patients for a 90-day period. You know what our state allows. I dislike that word, being allowed. So anyway, they confiscated what we were allowed to have for 90 days. What happened then is we started through a case. I had 5 charges. 4 of them were felonies. 1 was a misdemeanor. Peggy had 4 felonies with hers. They decided to drop the charges in March of 2018 because they didn't have evidence. They didn't know really what they were dealing with. But in May, I think it was May 7th or 8th or something, they recharged us without waiting for PCI test results to come back. This time, I ended up with 16 charges. 14 of them were felonies, and 2 of them were misdemeanors. Peggy ended up with 2 misdemeanors and 13 felonies. Through that, we were looking at somewhere between 21 and 56 years in prison. For me, giving 2 grams of cannabis oil to another adult. Yeah. Whether that's what I done. I gave 2 grams to another adult. Going throughout this case, which did take 2 years and 9 months, and again, we were looking at anywhere from 21 to 56 years, losing our home, losing our daughter. You know, Peggy has MS, suffers bad with MS. I have Crohn's and COPD, and even one of us goes to prison. He has death sentence for even one of us, essentially. But we went to court we had a sentencing, our plea agreement, change of plea hearing. What happened is I pled guilty to an F3 attempt of manufacturing, an F4 of trafficking of hash, and an F5 or an F3 possession of hash. Peggy had to plead to an F3 child endangerment, a F3 possession of hash, and an F4 of possession of cannabis. Yes. You want to ask something, Stephanie?
Yes, I want to know how much our activist friends helped your case.
Wow. We had a lot of public support. I will say that Carrie Cannon absolutely was our biggest and loudest voice that we had. We had a lot. We had the Human Solution International standing behind us. We had Stephanie Landis. We had we had Canada Convict Project behind us. We had Free Indeed Reentry organization behind us. There was a lot of Vet Meds Matter. They supported us, their organization. We had a lot of support, and I do think that because of the amount of public awareness and public support that we had, and all the, Carrie's Cannon was brought up because she started a petition for us that got over 5,400 signatures. She also collected a binder full. I think Peggy and I ended up with a total of she could probably correct you and tell you exact numbers, but I believe that there was 35 different sheets of pictures that were sent. But because of that, and I think because of public support and awareness that we had, Peggy and I ended up going from 21 to 56 years in prison to only receiving 5 years of probation. We did not get.
Tell us what probation entails. Is that you're not allowed to use? Tell us what it is.
Well, our probation is pretty much just like our bond was throughout the entire case. And it's kind of strange because, we were charged with the possession of cannabis, charged with it. And it carried throughout our entire case. But we were bonded. We were actually the first people ever to be bonded on bond, be bonded to use cannabis. Going through a cannabis case of being possession, felony possession, aggravated. It was an aggravated felony possession charge, which was a felony 3. But with that, they allowed us to use throughout the case, and going forward, being on probation for the next 5 years, we have not been prohibited from that. The court made it very clear that cannabis is an essential medicine. He deemed it as if a doctor prescribed it for us, we have a prescription, so therefore it is something that they're not going to take away from us. Yes, ma'am.
Mickey.
I'd like to know what state is Ohio?
We are in Ohio.
Yeah.
Our bond, look, the worst thing on our bond or on our probation that we have is we have a 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, I mean, to go from, potentially looking at what would be Peggy's and the rest of our lives in prison, to being on 5 years of probation with no mandatory fine. We did not get our license suspended, and I was looking at 15 years license suspension.
Well, and the horrible thing of it all is that we saw the first spot that I put up, that gentleman that was talking about ICE and coronavirus in the prisons. You have 45% lung capacity. How could they consciously put you in with that crap?
They don't have a conscience.
Right, and that's what the COPD I have. Because a lot of, it's really for them even to charge us and for us to go through this for the 2 years and 9 months we did.
And weren't they going to fine you $37,000 or something?
They was. That was what the mandatory fine was for my charges was $37,400, I think $82. But that was all waived and did not get a mandatory fine. Peggy was looking at $17,600 and something for her fine.
What do you believe was the key, and what can you share with other people that may be in the same situation you are experiencing? Because now that 33 states are legal and that we're growing and selling in dispensaries, it seems like we're still in a backward state. What can you share that you think convinced the judge? And tell us if it's one person that makes the decision for you to go in or out.
Right. It does essentially comes down to just one person making, a judgment when it comes to sentencing. It's all left up to the judge completely. I think that the determining factor in ours and what helped us in our case is that we had 2 years and 9 months of absolute complete support, public support. And that was nonstop people calling every day. I mean, 2 years and 8 months of people calling the prosecutor's office, calling the judge, not particularly the judge, but calling the judge's office and calling the clerk's office, calling the sheriff's department, calling everybody that was involved with this and letting them know how wrong this is, because we are medical patients. That medicine is essential to us, and it's been deemed essential to us.
Well, we're so
yeah,
proud. We're so proud of you, Glenn, for sharing your story. We're going to keep moving the show on today, and we're blessed that you have great news. And the bad news is that we're still federally bound to this horrible situation. I mean, we want to learn more about how to make that day happen that you got, but also 2 years and all the stress and the lack of sleep. We're just proud of you, and hemp hooray.
Thank you, and thank you again for having me on and letting me tell my story and getting it out there. And again, public support and public awareness is number one. That's the biggest key to our case.
Well, I have some news about Michael Thompson here. If I can come down on my own computer and find I think I have a Word document here that this Word document says, please help Michael by calling the parole board and the Governor Whitmer to urge them not to return Michael to prison from the hospital. He has already served 25 years for only 3 pounds of cannabis. Don't let a nonviolent cannabis sentence become a death sentence for Michael Thompson. And everybody, here are the phone numbers out on Facebook and out on the globe, because we're through IBM.TV, everybody, we're going global. So Portugal, listen to this, but everybody in America, listen to Glenn. They got off, and we need to call Governor Whitmer's office. Slam that phone number, 517-373-3400, and Michael's badge, his number for being in prison is 176-309. So everybody call in for Michael. He's our person we want to help for the day. And thanks, Glenn, so much. We're really proud of you. And we're back on now. And Stephanie, why don't you introduce our next guest?
Okay, I'd like to introduce Diane Goldstein. She's a 21-year veteran of the law enforcement who served as the first female lieutenant for the Redondo Beach, California Police Department. She's a speaker and board chair for the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Oh, they changed the name. A group of criminal justice professionals that work advancing justice and public safety solutions. She's a guest columnist for many media organizations, and I hope she'll be for ours, and recognized as a subject matter expert on criminal justice and drug policy, as well as playing a critical role in passing legislative reform that include cannabis legislation and civil asset forfeiture reform in California. And I do want to be friends with Diane because I'm not friends with any person. You know, she's my friend. But Diane just got under my skin, and I'm telling you, she's just an amazing person. So you're next, Diane.
Welcome, Diane. Neil Franklin is in my movie, and he's my buddy.
I love Neil. Neil's amazing. So Neil has been my mentor since I started at LEAP back in 2010 when we were a single focus on drug policy. And so, you know, the work that all of you guys do here is so critically important in talking about the inequities of the criminal justice system. But I would like to say that it's not for us, you know, is cannabis is critically important on rolling back the damage of the drug war. But what I don't want us to lose focus on is all drugs. You know, prohibition is wrong across the aspect. And yes, I think it's an easier win for us with cannabis, but we have a lot of people that are languishing in prison, both at the federal, state, local level, relative to a policy that we should be treating from a public health perspective and from a liberty perspective. And so, you know, I'm so sorry to hear about your experience in Ohio, and I think that goes back to speak about the importance of how we craft legislation. Because Mickey, I can't remember, but I think in Prop 64 is adults are allowed to share medicine or you know, cannabis on an adult level without that type of ramification. And so, you know, as we continue to push forward and both at the federal level and the individual states, we've got to really put in there some really critical, important legislative reforms that protect actions like what you did. It shouldn't be if you are passing, you know, a small amount of cannabis, whether it's cannabis oil or an edible, to another adult consumer or patient, it shouldn't be illegal.
Is adult 18 or 21?
In California, it's 21.
Okay.
It's 21 here too. And see, I thought I didn't think I was doing wrong because I was giving 2 grams to somebody else that had the recommendation. I did not think I was doing
Yeah, that would have been legal in California.
It's super.
And it also protects parents. If you're a marijuana patient, it protects parents to be able to use it in their homes as well.
Right. Right. I think that once we all get on the page, Diane, I'm really proud of you for being part of LEAP. It used to be Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, I think.
That's correct. Yeah, we were seeking to focus on drug policy, but you know, interesting enough as we changed the name and moved forward, what we saw is by being singularly focused on only drug policy, that there's a lot of police officers and criminal justice professionals that agreed with us, but because the way that the law was crafted, they couldn't necessarily speak for us. And so when we broadened the name to include, you know, multiple silos, so, you know, we do mass incarceration, we do harm reduction, we do public health strategies, we, you know, police accountability and transparency, we're able to tie it into drug policy pretty significantly. On our website, we have a great graphic that I call the tree of evil instead of the tree of good. And at the bottom is drug prohibition. And we're working to lop off all those bad branches, civil asset forfeiture reform that marginalizes poor people in particular in the way that it funds the drug war. Police accountability, reforming drug laws, making it completely decriminalized in a public health strategy, not just for cannabis, but for all drugs. There's a lot of different things that we're doing that I think have been very critical in pushing the conversation forward. Making those as I did a kind of work with Nikki and Kristen in the Proposition 64 campaign. And to be able to come from my experience as a police officer and say this, one of the most singular policy failures that we've had in policing has been the enforcement of our drug laws, because it's created systemic disparities, and whether we intended it to be racist or not, it propped up systemic racism and institutional racism in our society. And so, my intent is to blow up not just the war on marijuana, because it's really a war on people, but the entire war on drugs, because all we've done is wasted, over $1 trillion, and that money, could have been used in so many other categories that would have made all our communities safer. And so,
Diane, I think, hang on, Glenn, for a second. I think on your thread there, that I will do my due diligence to get somebody as a representative from Portugal to tell us how it's going there, because they decriminalized all non-pharmaceuticals like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was at the Oregon Country Fair and I heard it, I started crying, and so if we get on the same page on every state and we have one initiative that is the same, then we can help each state to learn what we did wrong in our individual states that's not working. And I think we should have one initiative.
Yeah, and let me speak to Portugal.
Yes.
Because Portugal, the Portugal project, as I always call it, has been in existence now for at least 10 plus years. Portugal decriminalized all drugs. But what people don't understand is decriminalization means something different in Europe than it does here in the United States. And so we need to be clear about the language. When I talk about decriminalization, I talk about it from a Portugal fashion. No criminal penalty, okay? But in Portugal, it's still illegal to sell drugs. You can possess them, but you can't sell them, okay? And so it's a step in the right direction, but it's still, there's still issues there where people can become criminalized because they're growing and they're selling marijuana. So, I just want to, but I would prefer that we treat chronic substance use disorder or simple possession of drugs from a Portugal perspective versus how we treat it.
Right, it's a global issue, and it's a war on people. It's a war on people, and the global issue is I think by all of us holding hands and the few little years that we all have left in life to make Jack Harrer's dream come true and end prohibition and re-legalize marijuana so people can come home out of jail and get work and not have a record.
I wanted to ask, coming from law enforcement standpoint, from somebody from law enforcement, what would you say would be taking the actual drug criminal off the street versus, say, a patient? What would, from your standpoint, what would that percentage look like?
Well, I guess here's the issue is that, and maybe will speak to this probably much more eloquently than I will, is so my career was 1983 to 2004. So I saw Proposition 215 implemented in California, and I also saw how law enforcement, whether it's the DA's associations or law enforcement associations, in particular the California Narcotics Officers Association, undermined it. And we never kept track of really whether they were a patient. And I don't want to tag people who use drugs as criminal. Okay. I think that criminal behavior needs to be separated from drug use. We have research and studies that show 80% of all drug use is most people are able to overcome, substance use issues without court intervention or without public health intervention.
Or jail time. Or jail
Or
time.
So, it is, we know, the use of the uniform crime reporting at the FBI, for years, that out of, let's say, 1.5 million people we arrest for all drug offenses, is marijuana tends to be one of the highest offenses, and a lot of it is citations and arrest, and not necessarily people ending up in prison. But when you start looking at how effective we are, is 80%, roughly 85% of all the people that we arrest in the United States are for simple possession. The rest are for selling drugs. And so, decriminalization at least reduces that 80 to 85%, but I don't want to do decriminalization here in the United States the way that people here look at it, which is mandatory drug court. You still have records. There's no expungement. I want it to be, it's a true public health intervention, and you don't go to jail for it. And we do an assessment, because if you really don't have a drug problem, like Portugal does,
Right.
we shouldn't be forcing you into drug treatment. It's a complete waste of fiscal resources. And so, it's hard to say. In California, when 215 passed, everybody who said they were a patient was having their cannabis taken from them, still getting tickets, and still potentially going to jail.
There is a lot of hypocrisy around the wording of these propositions, and the solution is yet to be seen in our lifetime. Where, like I said, I'm just a proponent of one solution, where maybe we get a room full of elders and do a council and come up with that one initiative. Because why should every state be different? It's still a federal illegal Schedule 1 drug, which is dumb, because cocaine is Schedule 2 and marijuana is Schedule 1, and it's hard on people like Glenn. If we re-legalized marijuana, we could have paper, fiber, fuel, and outfits. My shirt is hemp, my vest is hemp, my jacket is hemp, and my hat is hemp. So today is Hemp Day. Let's introduce Mickey.
Yep.
Oh, you want to say something, Stephanie? Okay.
I just wanted to say something really quick about here in Ohio, when HB 523 became law in September 2016. That day, in the state of Ohio, it took cannabis from a Schedule 1 and moved it to a Schedule 2 per HB 523.
Audrey, are you here? Audrey, are you with us? Hey, Audrey.
Joining her neighbor, Jack Herr, who's all our friends. And I love her. She's like a good girl. She toured California promoting hemp for fuel, food, fiber, fun, and medicine, beginning her lifelong love and dedication to cannabis. Audrey's been involved in countless cannabis campaigns and projects, including being a founding member of Americans for Safe Access, serving on the board of the Marijuana Policy Project, opening early dispensaries, community centers, and gardens throughout the state, working closely with community service providers and city government to create enlightened cannabis policy, and funding major cannabis research and reform projects. She currently shares her vast operational experience by sitting on the board of a number of licensed dispensaries throughout California, and has created and launched several brands, including Remain Safe Okay, now you go.
Hello, Andre. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, sweet.
Okay, there we go. Is that it?
Fantastic. We got you.
Yay!
Welcome.
I was going to say, that about sums it up. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm super, super happy to be here today, especially with all the incredible people here today, but especially the incredible women that I've had the honor of working with over the years. It's such a long, strange trip. I'm the luckiest person on earth. My neighbor was Jack here, and meeting him was like being struck by lightning, and really just started my path. For me, I came from a place, I had been in foster care and group homes and just mad at the system. And being with Jack really gave me a purpose and somewhere to channel my fight against the system. So cannabis saved my life and has been my entire life. Just had amazing adventures on the bus with Jack, as you could probably imagine. A lot of psychedelics, a lot of imagining what the future might look like, a lot of adventures and misadventures that I'm just so, just so lucky to have experienced. And just, through that, I volunteered with many activist groups, and whenever I hear about people wanting to get into this space, I always tell them, it's volunteering that got me everywhere. Volunteering with Jack, that wasn't a paid position. We did it because we loved what we did. Working with these activist organizations, we weren't getting paid. We just really loved what we did. But it opened up a lot of doors for me and gave me a lot of opportunities in the cannabis community.
Were you on Wilshire Boulevard at the rallies?
I was, absolutely, 100%. Yep, that's the time I was around with Jack back then, and those were incredible. So
Ellen Comp and I had a table there every time there was a Wilshire Boulevard event. It was fantastic.
Are you talking about the Federal Building?
Yeah, at the Federal Building on Wilshire. Yeah.
West.
Yep, on Wilshire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We met in the weirdest places.
Yeah, exactly. The best place.
And what are you working on now, Andre? What's going on for you today?
So I oversee retail operations for several dispensaries across the state. I'm really excited about brands and working on brands. I'm really proud that our group has stayed true. We've always started with a compassion program, and we've always kept a robust compassion program all the way through, when it was more difficult in the state. We helped pass a rule at one time in Berkeley saying that all cannabis businesses were required to give away compassion. So, trying to come into this new space because what we're doing now is completely different, in the legalized market and in, today's structured world than it was a few years ago. But, trying to keep the compassion and community element going as well.
Well, I think the fact that you met Jack and that you were part of the history of the movement that we're involved with right now, including we're going to hear from Nikki next, it gives us more passion, more compassion to be able to do what we're doing today still, and in Jack's memory to end prohibition.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's, it already takes a certain personality to really want to go out there and do all that work without, without thinking about recognition or pay or anything like that, just because you love it so much. And that'll never change. And I think looking at every person that's here today, every person's individual passion that has brought their story to where it is today. So I'm super honored to be here among you all, and it's really fascinating. Everybody's different stories and paths that they've had on this journey.
Thank you so much for all you do and for continuing to make a stand and speak your truth.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's migrate down to our beautiful publisher and partner, Chris Conrad. Tell us your name, Mickey, and take it away.
Are you going to introduce me, Stephanie, or should I just start talking?
I thought Jeff was going to introduce you, but no, go ahead. But I met Amy really quickly. Like, she introduced me to Amy, who's my really good friend now, who does candid clemency and gets everybody out of jail. And she was in jail, and that's how I met her. She said, "Oh, you have to be friends with Amy."
So introducing Mickey Norris, the inspiration for just about everything that I do was this book that was published. When was this book published?
The book was published in 1998.
So
it was based on a photo exhibit that we launched in 1995 for the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, so that we could expose the drug war for its human rights violations. We wanted to bring the prisoner issue, the mass incarceration issue, to the world community that was congregating in San Francisco for the 50th anniversary of the UN. And we wanted to show them that the United States has serious human rights violations going on in the name of it. I think what we are doing in terms of arresting, incarcerating, having only 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population, and that was because of the drug war, primarily because of the drug war. And at the time that we launched this photo exhibit, it was called Human Rights 95 Atrocities of the Drug War. And at that time we showed about 100 photos and told the stories of many people in prison on nonviolent drug offenses. And anyway, it was quite the work. We met Virginia Resner, who was our partner in this project, Chris and I, as a result of going to a Cannabis Action Network meeting where somebody handed me a photo of I'm a little distracted on the screen. We've got Andre's room in there that anyway, it was at the Cannabis Action Network meeting that somebody handed me a photo of this woman named Jody Israel, who was just sentenced to 12 years in prison as a first-time nonviolent marijuana offender. Her husband, Calvin Schreiber, had just been sentenced to 29 years as a first-time nonviolent marijuana offender. And he was considered a Rastafarian, but he was considered a kingpin of this marijuana distribution in Montana. And I saw the photo of Jody. It came with a photo of Jody's 3 children, and it came with a fax from Jody's mother that said, "Can you help us? They're making orphans of my grandchildren. They cry and miss their parents, and we love them and good to them." And in that instant, from that photo, it struck me how wrong our drug policies were, and who was really the victims of the drug war. And I saw it really not only the individuals whose lives were destroyed and shattered by the arrest, the prosecution, incarceration, losing their homes, losing their money, losing their freedom, and sentenced to years and years in prison. But we also saw it was the children whose lives were being shattered by being orphaned, by losing their parents. And as somebody, I lost my dad when I was 13. He died, but I knew what it was like to lose a parent who you loved. And it just struck me how wrong that our government made a policy of doing this to our own people. And so that launched that project. As a result, I was introduced to Virginia Resner, who was the California Families Against Mandatory Minimums representative, and her boyfriend was serving a mandatory minimum in prison for a nonviolent drug offense. And we made an outreach to many prisoners through the FAM reps that with a form that said, if you feel your human rights have been violated in the name of the drug war, please fill out this form, send us a photo, send us your story, and we'll show it. And when we launched it in June of 1995 in San Francisco, Park Mesa, it was this huge exhibit. I mean, we just found out in February, and then we launched it in June. It was like a manifestation. It's like it had to be this project. You know, things came together. It was almost a divine kind of thing that we felt we were channeling to put it out into the world, to expose this great injustice that we saw. So that's what launched the project. And it became, you know, we showed the photo exhibit around. I made many copies. I made about 30 copies for other people to show locally around the country. And then we knew we had to make it into a book to make it more accessible. And then the book got around. And the thing I'm most proud about with the book, aside from it exposing these terrible problems with the, you know, in our country in the name of the drug war, was how many people have woke up and how many people saw it as a real thing. And I want to shout out to Stephanie, who's sitting in this Zoom call holding up posters, which is the whole point of what we wanted to do. It's like, you can say all these statistics. You can say, yeah, 1.5 million people getting arrested every year for drug offenses. But if you tell the story, like Glenn told his story, if Stephanie's showing a photo of somebody who's in prison, it really makes it real for everybody. And it's, I think, the most important thing to do is for everybody to tell their stories. For patients, that's what helped us get Prop 215. Patients started coming up to the mic at city council meetings, on TV, or wherever they were, and telling their story, how cannabis helped them, that it saved their lives, made them have a decent life. And or people who are in prison so unjustly, like this Michael Thompson that you're trying to seek help for. You know, we originally saw this as kind of, Chris and I, you know, we were in the marijuana field in terms of our activism. But we saw it as marijuana prisoners, as being prisoners of conscience, as political prisoners, because it seemed to be a political decision on what drugs are legal, what drugs are not legal. I mean, if you do it based on who dies from these drugs, it's not, you know, it's not marijuana that's killing anybody, and yet it's a Schedule I drug. And so we saw it as a political decision, and people were sitting in prison for that. But you can say the same thing for any of the drugs, like Diane pointed out. And it's the way we're treating the whole drug situation.
So it's
a criminal issue rather than a public health issue.
It's an education issue, is what you're saying, and what drove you to publish and to educate the people that didn't know, that should know, and that can reach your book and go in there and on page blah 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 and on page blah blah blah, it just totally, like, it gives a record of educating the mass.
Yeah, well, it was definitely a big public education campaign. I don't think people even knew. I didn't even know before 95. I mean, I was an activist since like the late 80s. And I didn't really know about mandatory minimum sentences. And I didn't know about conspiracy laws that you don't need any drugs or money and hearsay evidence. Somebody pointing a finger at you can get you a 20-year sentence in prison for very minimal, involvement or no involvement at all, just because you were there next to somebody who's the only way they get their 20-year sentence reduced is by pointing their finger at somebody else.
Yeah, why Glenn's wife was introduced into the story, when she had nothing to do with the situation. She was Glenn.
And your newspaper, how about your newspaper?
Yeah, well, we published a newspaper as well. I mean, my activism through the years has taken many forms, and it's mostly in the public education and letting people know what's happening. We did a newspaper, the West Coast Leaf, that got into dispensaries all over California and other states as well. So we did human rights in the drug war for, a long time. And then other people like Laura Callahan with the November Coalition and Amy when we helped her with her clemency petition and bring attention to her case to get out of prison. And then Amy, once she was out of prison, formed Can Do Clemency and was able to advocate for people that she left behind in prison after spending 9 years herself in prison, came out and remembered people, and people like Stephanie is carrying on the banner for the prisoners that we can't leave behind, because these are real lives that are being impacted. You started the show with that video of that guy who was picked up by ICE and talking about the conditions there. Well, the thing is that we're not treating people as people, we're treating them as commodities. These inmates, these ICE people, they're commodities. They're worth money to this drug war industrial complex, to the prison industrial complex, that are making lots of money on the arrest and incarceration of these people. So I'm advocating at this point for, defunding the drug war. We need, if we're talking about defunding anything, we should defund, take that money away and, stop things from happening, making changes as well, police practice that will inhibit things like Breonna Taylor, who was a victim of a no-knock search warrant, which the drug war seems to allow cops to come in the middle of the night, unannounced, and frightening people because they're so afraid that somebody's going to destroy their evidence, that they'll come in with battering rams and in the middle of the night and scare these people, and they don't know what's happening, and they come back cheap because we have an armed society. People have guns in this country. So what do you expect? There's going to be accidents. That's a practice that should be ended. Should definitely be ended. I just wanted to also mention that what Andre said about volunteerism. This whole movement got this far because of the volunteer actions of people. It's not about the money; it's about your compassion. And I'm glad she's continuing that with her dispensary to serve the patients as well. And so kudos to all. Much respect and high honor to all the volunteers who are still working for this. It's not just now that cannabis is becoming an industry. We're losing a lot of the community, a lot of the movement side of things, and that's a little sad. But that's why, Chris and I are onto it. Since we don't really fit in the industry space, because we're not business people, we're activists who care about social justice and we care about the environment. So we got involved in this issue. But we are, as addition to the high commercialization of cannabis, we have now turned our attention more towards the spirituality of what cannabis brings us. And that I think is a big motivator and causes a lot of the passion for people, that the plant itself has a spirit that compels people to be conscious, to care about social justice, to care about the environment. So we've been developing. We also wanted to develop a religious use defense in court for people who use cannabis as their sacrament, because we believe that many people do. And I started after Human Rights in the Drug War, I started the Cannabis Consumers Campaign, which asked cannabis consumers, to come out of the closet to show that we're good, contributing members of society. We're the good people. We don't deserve this kind of treatment. We're not criminally minded. We deserve, the same rights as everybody else in society, and to live our lives peacefully and responsibly like everybody else. So, so we also wanted to create a religious use defense. So we've been developing this practice called Panamaste, where we have circles of people where we're creating little rituals around the use of cannabis, but also to have intentional cannabis use to keep the community spirit going as a result, because cannabis really is a community kind of thing. Yeah, it gives us all personal physical relief, probably personal mental relief, but it also provides us opportunities to be bonding and sharing and communing with our fellow humans and fellow beings on this planet as well. So I feel like cannabis itself has compelled me to be the activist that I am today, because I like to bring up this one anecdote about Senator Orrin Hatch, the former senator from Utah, who back in the 90s said, you could tell your kids, your teenagers are using marijuana because all of a sudden they care about social justice and they care about the environment. And it was like, that's a sign that your kids have a problem, So it was like, that was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. But I think there's truth to the fact that cannabis does instill in us those feelings.
Well, just think about alcohol or opiates. They take you in a different direction, and they're not as gentle. And nobody's ever actually died from cannabis smoke, and it doesn't make you angry. I always say cannabis is the gateway to the munchies, and it doesn't lead to heroin, but you can get addicted to anything if you overuse anything. So it's coming back to education, and I have one cannabis nurse. She calls it meducation. So I'm really blessed to have you on service for so many years, Nikki. You've been doing a great job, and you've been there with Jack. You've been through it all. We've been to Drug Policy Alliance together, and it's just time to end prohibition, everybody. And in my lifetime, I don't want any prisoners left in jail, everybody. This is Jeff Eichen on WEEDsday. We're on the hemp day. It's like hump day because we're in the middle of the week, everybody. How you doing? And I'm just really happy that you're here with us, everybody, and that we got so many beautiful people on the on our show today. I'm just trying to pin me here, but it doesn't seem to work. So I'm going to go back to this view, and I'm blessed that Stephanie is with us. She's an ex-POW. We have an ex-cop here that's seen the light, and we have people in the industry, and we have Glenn, who him and his wife made it through. Wasn't nullified, but it might as well have been, and we're proud of you, Glenn.
I know you're running time, but I wanted to touch on something that Nikki had brought up. That activist, and I think that is a difference between when you got into activism, when you become an activist, and the activist today. I think today there's a lot of really part-time activists, and it's sad because they pick and choose on who they'll support or what they'll support. And I think that's a big difference from, when you become an activist to the activist today. I grew up, my parents were involved with Normal back in the 70s. So, I mean, it was something that I grew up with, So I've been around that. And my activism didn't just pop up. I've been an activist for a long time. I do think that there's a difference between Jack Harris activism time and the activists that we have today. And I think that's a strong statement for people that's been in from the 70s and 80s and still struggling and still taking that same fight. And I think that a lot of these newer activists, they need to take note of that and walk in the same steps that you guys have walked in. And I'm grateful and thankful for all of you people that have led the way. And, because of you, we're all allowed someplace here in America, in 33 states now, allowed to consume cannabis. And I thank you all for your struggle and your hard work that you've gone and done.
Come on in, Stephanie.
Okay. I was going to agree. I think anybody that's volunteering as an activist, I don't care if they started yesterday. It's like, we need volunteers, and anybody that volunteers and works for free with no money and nothing is welcome. I welcome everyone. So there's still the old volunteers that are there when never quit. I mean, I take oil every day because I have cancer. If I didn't, I probably didn't get. So I just think that anybody wants to volunteer for 5 minutes, call me.
Fantastic. Well,
And can I say also that there's different types of activism that is happening? Like right now, we're doing a lot of genetics around CBD-rich cannabis to try to get it out, to a bigger market. People that wouldn't normally smoke, to get high. But I feel like that's part of the activism, is to get cannabis to everybody.
well, my dream is a retirement home that's rainbow, and Jimmy Buffett is doing that in Florida, and that we can smoke and we can have the medicine, the CBD that's non-THC for our joints, and it can come through the doors of the retirement homes. And if we take our money, some of the wealthier marijuana people, then I'm not young, I'm 62, and I'm looking in 10 years to be 72 and then 82. It would be beautiful to have a rainbow retirement home and beautiful wheels and music and dancing and medicine.
So I'm going to end it because I have to get off for another conference call.
Thank you, Diane.
No, but I want to say this because this is so important. The reason I joined LEAP was because I really believe that, I didn't back then believe all drugs needed to be centrally regulated, but I really always thought cannabis should have been, going back to my career and even before that. But what I also want to say is the concern that I have, and that many people in LEAP have, is that because we're winning, in many ways on the battlefront of cannabis and cannabis regulation, is we can't forget the social equity issues that evolve out of this. And then I don't want folks who are only actively involved in cannabis activism to think that there's not more work to be done. Is Andre knows, Nikki knows, Steph knows, Glenn knows, all you guys know, is the drug war across the scale of our global world it violates human rights on a regular basis, from executions in the Philippines, in Saudi Arabia, the way that we treat people who use drugs is wrong. And so I don't want, and even Nadelman at the BPA said this for years, is, marijuana exceptionalism exists. Let's not forget those outside of it, because just because we win, and I think down the road, cannabis will be descheduled, and every state will have adult consumption or medical marijuana laws, we also have an obligation to continue that fight and that battle for human rights that crosses all drugs. And so, yes, let's start with cannabis, but let's not forget.
It is the war on people, and we're great to have you. Diane, can you put your email in the chat box here, because we're going to be sending out release forms from now on, so we can have access to this footage. We're on IBM.TV, everybody. We're blessed to see you, global, everybody, down in Uruguay, in Peru. We're just so happy to share with you how we're doing in America. With the fight against the war on people and drugs and marijuana. Cannabis is our slice, and make some infused pesto like we had Bitsy Bates make last week on our show, and we'll have her back. Thank you, Diane, for coming in. Any last words, Andre? Audrey?
Looks like Andre might have. Hi.
Any last words?
Yes, Hemp Hemp Hooray.
Hemp hemp hooray, like Jack would
There
say.
she is. I also want to thank Diane, although she's not here right now. But it's so important that law enforcement is part of this movement. Reformed law officers who get the fact that this policy has failed, that it's wrong-minded, that it's causing much more harm than good. And it's people like Diane whose voices are just so important to the discussion, that they know, that this drug war needs to end, and not just for marijuana.
Well, and the people in charge can see Diane used to be a cop and now she's not. And so that is proof and purchase that it's time to change.
Definitely. She knows, they know, Neil Franklin knows, and a lot of the law enforcement are think it's not worth the time or money, and that is just too destructive. It's not achieving any of the goals that they originally thought, and so we're like looking at rescheduling. We really need to deschedule the especially marijuana. We need to deschedule, treat it like alcohol or tobacco, or treat it like
Re-legalize it.
Herbal supplements or something, because I don't even think people should have to get a doctor's recommendation to use it medically if they feel it's helping them.
Well, when my parents came home, they would have a drink to relax. That was their choice. That was their choice, not to abuse it, And so we should be able to get our prisoners home, everybody, and globally, we should be able to legalize it and learn from alcohol. They were in prohibition, and to learn how they're doing it and utilize the taxes to balance the budget. It's $1 billion industry. Hemp toilet paper, everybody. I don't have any. I want it. Let's not cut any more trees, and let's fight for Greta and the children. Greta Thunberg don't forget about climate change, but these children are the ones we want to have. Maybe we'll have a children's show. Come on in.
Toilet paper. And toilet.
I told you. Yeah. You heard it here. No more trees. Let's figure out global warming. We're thinking about the pandemic so much that we're forgetting about other issues that could be about the health of humanity. So I'm going to wrap it up, everybody. Glenn, any final words?
Just public support is huge. So find a case somewhere, support somebody. If not, write a letter.
We're so proud of you, Glenn, for making it through what you did, and you look great. Thank you so much, and say hello to your sweetheart Peggy Sue. And Audrey, any final words?
Like I said, moving forward as we go into different spaces, I feel like, kind of us like-minded activists kind of need to fill every space, from the licensed people to the justice system and police officers and longtime activists. I mean, I think it's really important that we all keep the work going.
Stay united. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to leave your email. I'm going to send out some release forms.
Thank you.
And Mickey, great to see you, Mickey. Haven't seen you in a bit. And we'll get Chris on next week or soon. Any final words?
Yeah, I feel like this is our moment. I mean, what's happening in the world right now, especially with the racial injustice that we're seeing. The drug war was started on the backs of racist ideology against Mexicans and Black people, and it has worked just as planned. It's targeted Black and brown people disproportionately. They're filling our prisons. Marijuana prohibition has enabled cops to stop people for stop and frisk, stop and search. That escalates into terrible things. So if we can, it needs to be on the table. The ending the drug war, ending marijuana prohibition needs to be on the table right now, because it's so timely in helping to address the injustices, the racial injustices that are going on right now. It might not end it, because racism is systemic in this country, and it started off, it has a long history. So there's a lot of tentacles that need to be fixed.
Well, there's racism.
This is a major one that we could, if we could address this, it'll have a major impact.
There's racism against marijuana. I mean, it's being, that's the one they're calling out. And it's time. It's paper, fiber, fuel, medicine, and food. That's what Jack said every time on his show. Paper, fiber, fuel, medicine, and fun. Yeah, paper, fiber, fuel, medicine, food, and fun. And I just think that it's just the lighter of all the mind-altering substances on the planet. Why should it be Schedule 1 anymore? Anybody? Here at WEEDsday and the Hemp Day, we'll let Stephanie send us home. And thank you, everybody. Don't forget to give me your emails, and stay close to us. And Hemp Hemp Hooray.
Hemp Hooray.
Stephanie, roll us out here.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, for giving us a voice. And just go to my new website, WEEDsday.org, and it's very interactive. You can help just by pushing buttons, signing petitions. And thank you, everyone, for coming on a lot. My heroes.
Well, it was a great show today.
Thanks one to no one.
Nugent, you can roll our outro.
Welcome to Weed Wednesdays, produced by International Broadcast Media, better known as IBM.TV. I'm your host, Jeff Eichen, human rights advocate and social activist, fighting for government deregulation of weed and the release of all nonviolent criminals incarcerated for possession of marijuana, moving violations, parking tickets, IRS debt, etc. Here on WEEDsday, we keep the public informed about all things weed related, including festivals and legislation surrounding regulating the growth of hemp. Today, my guests are
There's something happening here. There's something happening.